Gosh, maybe. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think it's appropriate that I review and report to our members what Parliament United has achieved during this term in Parliament. We've stopped the GP co-payment, we've stopped the changes to university, we've stopped $10 billion cuts to social security, freed 436 children and 1,500 adults from detention on Christmas Island, resolved with the Ministers Scott Morrison 30,000 cases in detention. We've supported and introduced the Safe Haven Enterprise visas. We've voted in the Senate to save the low-income super for over 2 million Australians. We've kept the school kids bonus and the low-income support. When the carbon tax was abolished, we stood firm in the Senate and reduced electricity prices by 10% across Australia. In the Senate, we passed and put up 15 amendments to the direct action before it got through the Senate. We've seen the changes that has recently made in the recent times. We've also saved the Climate Change Authority, the Clean Energy Corporation, ARENA, and so far we've kept the RET target as it is. The government also moved to fixed pensions for all veterans over 55 years in accordance with our policy. In Queensland, we stopped the election of the Campbell Newman Government. We've been responsible with the government of setting up 3 parliamentary inquiries, I should say 2 of them, Trade and Investment and Growth from the Australia Fund for Drought Relief, and of course inquiry in the Senate for the inquiry of the Queensland Government. We've voted to support the abolition of the carbon tax, the mining tax, and next week we'll introduce a private members bill and to deal with the foreign death penalty issues that were recently raised. We've protected maritime workers and jobs. We've proved that the government community that Australia's debt was not the problem that was made out to be. Cabinet adopted our policy to ban lobbyists from party positions after its election. On electoral reform, we've been successful in having pens used instead of pencils. In the Senate, we voted to keep the Qantas Australian-owned, to stop changes to income tax free threshold and to stop the financial incentives to sell off public assets. We think we've saved jobs in the Australian offshore gas industry and stopped the slashing of university research grants. In October 2014, the IMF estimated that the Australian government's net debt would be 16.6% of GDP in 2015, below the 74.1% forecast for advanced economies. Under Prime Minister Menzies' government, our national debt was around 40%, and Australia today has the largest pool of funds under fund management, 3rd largest in the world and the largest in the Australian region. So we have plenty of capital. With 23 years of consecutive economic growth, labour productivity has recorded a compound annual growth rate of 1.8% per annum, while real unit labour costs have fallen by 0.5% every year to make Australia more competitive. Australia has one of the highest entry rates into tertiary education in the world at 102%, including international students, above the OECD average of 58%. High rates of tertiary education underpins Australia's position as the #1 developed country in terms of real GDP growth over the last 20 years. Australia has the 2nd largest stock market in the Asian region and the 8th largest in the world. Australia's market capitalisation on free-floating shares is greater than China's and double Hong Kong's at around 4 times the market capital of Singapore. Our $1.6 trillion superannuation system is the 4th largest in the world and is a major driver behind Australia's globally significant funds management industry. This will grow to 7.6 trillion funds, or 180% of GDP over the next 2 decades. We don't need to tamper with the pension. Australians provide for their own long-term requirement through their own efforts and the superannuation. We need to stimulate Australia. It's not a stimulus to reduce company tax by 1.5%. Small business have no profitability, so don't worry about paying tax. Without stimulating demand, there is no way that any tax incentive can work. The Australian government is the main practitioner of bankruptcy and company liquidations across Australia. As companies close, employees lose their jobs, the government loses group tax and people transfer from gainful employment to Centrelink. We need to protect the Australian people and their jobs. Let's protect what the country stands for. We need to have a Chapter 11 like they have in the US. When companies fail, businesses continue so that people and families are kept in their jobs. We need to support regional Australia by introducing zonal taxation system to decentralise Australia and maximise the growth in regional areas. Japan has become the world's third largest economy by processing Australian resources. The cost of energy in Japan is more expensive, and Japan suffers the tyranny of distance. Wages are higher.
The honourable member's time has
Thank
expired.
you.